Is the US housing market in such bad shape that the White House is seriously considering a national housing emergency declaration? Well, emergency powers normally are used for national disasters, and now they might be being applied to housing. What do you think this might mean for the country, and what does it mean for the Austin area? I'm Jeremy Knight, your favorite Austin realtor. There's a lot going on in the housing market right now, and a lot happening, especially with interest rates, as it looks like the jobs market numbers show we may see a Fed rate cut. In fact, the market is already pricing that in, but now you have the Trump administration now weighing in on this. So I want to hear from you in the comment section. Also, if you haven't subscribed to this YouTube channel, I like to try to keep you up to date on what's happening in the housing market, what's happening in Austin. I also do a lot of this on Instagram as well. So follow my short content on Instagram because we talk more about what's happening as far as like buildings and things like that, developments happening in the Austin area. So let's get into the Trump administration as they are weighing whether to use the National Emergencies Act to bypass Congress and force action on housing. If declared, the government could open federal land for new construction, override zoning / tariffs on building materials, and even adjust tax laws to push more homes onto the market. But there's no shortcut to supply. Builders already fighting material costs, labor shortages, and insurance spikes. And economists like Mark Zandi, they put it this way: the US has underbuilt housing for more than a decade. We're millions short of units that there's no fix to actually get. The consequences are already visible. Really, nearly half of all renters spend more than 30% of their income on housing. On a single night in January 2024, 770,000 Americans were actually homeless. And Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said last week, the United States cannot thrive if working families cannot afford a place to live. And one note about the housing shortage, I don't think that we're necessarily short on housing. What I think we're necessarily short on is affordable housing. And one thing that's never really defined in any articles that you read or from any of these administrations on what is affordable and what is not affordable. You tell me in the comment section what is affordable and what is not affordable. Obviously, everything is not affordable, but what does that dollar look like? What does that mean rent-wise? What does that mean for any of these things? The biggest problem I have, especially with the Austin City Council members, is they always say this is for affordable housing, but never define what that is. So you tell me, what is a definition of that? Not in mortgage rates, because they are everywhere and they are really what connects the housing and some of this affordability. The 30-year fixed mortgage rate had really been around the 6.5 range, down from 7%. That's the lowest it's been in nearly a year. And then last week on the news of potentially a Fed rate cut, we saw rates drop down to 6.28 the day of filming this video. And you compare that to like 2023, rates were around 8%. So why the drop? Well, slower job growth, weaker bond yields, and investors bet that the Fed will start cutting rates very, very soon.
I think the key here is jobs. I think that's the right place to focus. And of course, you know, with the recent data, we see job growth has come to a virtual standstill. And I don't see any reason why we'll see any pickup here anytime soon. So, and, you know, if we start getting some negative job numbers, which I think are really very possible, that would be a clear indication of recession. The Psalms rule is around the unemployment rate, Carl. You know, if it increases more than about a half a point on a 3-month moving average, you know, that historically has signaled recession. Interestingly, that may not be quite as telling this go around, because unemployment may not be the indicator to watch because of the weak labor force given immigration policy and some other things. We may not see unemployment rise to the degree that we have historically, belying the weakness in the economy, but nonetheless. So the Psalms rule may actually not be the indicator to watch, but you know, everything else strongly suggests that the economy is in trouble here.
Right. So 2 questions. Is a negative print part of your base case anytime in the next, by the end of the year? And where do you think break-evens are right now?
Yeah, I think break even, so that's the rate of monthly job growth consistent with stable unemployment. That's probably around 25, 50K, somewhere in there, you know, and that's kind of sort of where it feels like underlying job growth is now, abstracting from the vagaries of the data and measurement issues, that kind of thing. But if you know, the probability of a negative print, a negative number is pretty high. I think it's going to be difficult not to see some negative numbers here. And you know, historically, it's a negative payroll employment That is when the National Bureau of Economic Research, the folks that date business cycles, date recessions. Once that we go negative, that month that employment goes negative, that's the month when recession begins. Now, of course, you have to see a string of negative numbers. I mean, a recession is a persistent decline in economic activity. So it's not just 1 or 2 months, which seems very likely. We'll need something more than that to get a recession. But that number is going to be key to deciding when recession begins here in the next few months.
Greg McBride at Bankrate said mortgage rates are finally catching a tailwind, but affordability is still a headwind until prices adjust. And don't expect 3% mortgage rates again. Most forecasts put rates in the mid-6s through the end of this year. I'm curious if you've been following any of the people that call for a crash or any market predictors. What are they saying rates are going to be at? I did say for a long time that the last half of 2025 would be the best time to purchase for home buyers because rates would start to fall towards the end of the year. And so far, I'm looking right. But again, affordability, you saw over the last 3 months in the Austin area, we are at our peak for the year. So we could see prices down. And still, moving from 7% to low 6s saves hundreds a month on a $450,000 mortgage. So do you think that's going to be helping you? And actually, are you in the market to buy? And by the way, in the Austin area, we do help buyers and sellers throughout the whole Austin area. In fact, I have a network of over almost 6,000 agents nationally. So if you do need a referral, I have a link in bio in here or anywhere, and reach out to us and we'd love to connect you with a really good quality agent. Look, on this channel, I've tried not to sell real estate, but give you the best quality information I can and really trying to push a narrative. And so if you found value in that, I hope that you would subscribe to this channel. Now, I'm not perfect. Yes, I sell real estate. I have never said I don't sell real estate, but I'm also a real estate investor myself. Now let's look over at Austin. The median sold price in the city was around $608,000. That's up slightly year over year. So for everyone that thinking that prices are going to come down, well, we definitely need rates to come down to help some of those. And think about this too. If we do see rates drop, that means more home sellers are going to get off the sideline as well and put their homes on the market, and that is what we need. Across the metro, Redfin actually reported that it's closer to $555,000, which is not true because they're looking at the whole market, not actually just Austin. And Zillow has an average home value of about $512,000. And I go through this all the time. I'm about talking about the city versus the whole metro. It's 5 counties versus just the city. But let's remember, prices are still down 13 to 16% from the peak. Homes are staying on the market 60 to 70 days, and inventory has climbed about 5 months of supply. In Austin, in some places, it's close to 6 months. And Becky O'Grady from Unlock MLS put it this way: this is the healthiest market Austin has seen in years. Buyers have options, sellers have to be more realistic. So why hasn't Austin collapsed like some of the other markets? Well, you have a lot of jobs, Tesla, biotech, Whole Foods headquarters is here, tech startups, and a growth has just kept coming in. Now, a lot of people are looking at different growth in the Austin area as far as different tech sectors, and I've reported that it's not as strong as it once had been. So I'm asking you, what do you think the job market has been? Because like Austin City Council has eased zoning rules to allow more units on single family lots. It's not an instant solution, but it could help supply. And stability housing consultant Jim Gaines explained it best that Austin corrects, but it doesn't crash. The fundamentals here are just way too strong. And here's the reality: at the national level, the government may use emergency powers. At the city level, pod housing and other building can be done. And with rates falling, affordability can be a little bit more in reach, but it's still out of reach for many people. And in Austin, the frenzy is gone. Prices are stable, inventory is balanced, and buyers finally have negotiating power. A housing advocate summed it up by saying, until we build millions more homes, affordability will remain out of reach for many. But again, the biggest problem too is all of the costs have not come down to build homes more efficiently, and a lot of the builders are still having to pay a lot of extra fees. I'm curious what you think. Do you think that Trump going in and making a housing declaration emergency would actually help the housing market? I'm Jeremy Knight, your favorite Austin realtor. I do the news so you don't have to. So make sure you share this with a friend and make sure you subscribe to this channel. And oh yeah, follow me on Instagram at @TheRealJeremyKnight.